Most people quit when they come up against the boundary of the known self. So now, stepping out of the known into the unknown is the perfect place to create from. So it makes sense then, if you truly wanted to change, and I studied this when we studied spontaneous remissions. Well, the first question is, what thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? I mean, I think that's an important question.
Hello guys, today Dr. Dispenza will explain why it's so important to use our ability to think consciously. We are the only creatures on this planet that are capable to think consciously. All other creatures act based on their instinct. Only human beings have the ability to focus on whatever they want consciously. In fact, we can imagine something and we can enter that picture in first person, as we already are in that picture. Is it possible we have that ability just by accident? And how many of us really do assign some meaning to that ability? I'll leave you with Dr. Dispenza now, and he will explain the real importance of our conscious mind. If you are a fan of Dispenza and his work, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button. And don't miss any of new amazing videos. Have fun!
So when you put intention and attention behind it and you understand what you're doing, as you start to fire and wire those thoughts, if you keep doing it, you start installing neurological hardware. If you keep repeating it, repetition creates software, and all of a sudden, that will be the new thought in your head that says, I can, it's possible, anything's possible. That becomes the common thought in your head. There's no magic there. It becomes automatic because you installed it. And if you said, who am I going to be today? Well, how am I going to live? And instead of getting up and just starting a routine, while you sat there with your eyes closed, you rehearsed mentally the choices you were going to make and the things you're going to do. The research shows that if you do that properly, the brain won't know the difference between a real-life event and what you're imagining. And if you stay present with it, you install neurological hardware. If you keep it up every day, it becomes a software program and you start to behave like a happy person. Then here's the challenging part. Can you teach your body emotionally how it can feel in a new future? That means that you're going to have to feel the emotion of an event before it happens. Like, so most people will wait for their healing to feel gratitude. They'll wait for the change in their health to feel wholeness. That's kind of the old model of reality of cause and effect. We're waiting in lack and separation for something out there to tell us that we'll be better in here. That's a very compromised way of living, because we live in separation our entire life and we're disappointed. But if you understand that the body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between an actual experience that was creating the emotion and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone, and it's the environment signals the gene, you're signaling the gene ahead of the environment, and genes make proteins. So then, by elevating your emotional state, you are telling your body now to move back into growth and repair. And the word meditation literally means to become familiar with, and that's what you're doing. You're becoming so familiar, so conscious of your old self that you will not go unconscious again. And then you are moving into a new state by firing and wiring and elevating your emotions. If you keep practicing that, it'll begin to become familiar to you. So then most people, they try it out for 2 or 3 days, and then after 2 or 3 days, they give up, and they haven't mastered a formula that teaches them how to heal. They just want the lack and the pain and the separation to go away. But many people that we've studied that actually heal, I want you to know that when they truly make those changes, they'll tell you that was their greatest teacher. They will tell you it was their greatest lesson. They're so happy that they had the experience, because they literally changed who they were from living in a familiar past and into a new future. And it takes practice. The practice is what matters the most. But you know, I mean, we live in a Newtonian world. We live in three-dimensional reality, and most things take time. And so if you're working at it every day, shaving down those habits and overcoming those emotional states and emotional reactions, and you're becoming conscious, that is when you're no longer the program. You're conscious now. You're unconscious when you're the program. So that process sometimes takes people time to do that. And for me, in my own life, it sometimes we have to make our way. Why? Because we return back to our lives and we face challenges and we're back, taking on the world again. But sometimes, and we have scientists now coming in to study this, we see an instantaneous change that takes place in the body. I mean, it is immediate. There it is and there it's not. Whether it's blindness, deafness, tumors, stage 4 cancer, we've seen it all. So then the fact that it's happening in no time tells us it's not an effect of matter to matter. This is energy influencing matter, and it's not matter that's emitting a field. That's the illusion. It's the field that's creating matter. So learn how to change information in the field. Then the hologram in three-dimensional reality begins to change, and it takes practice. And so when you see energy influencing matter like that, because it's happening in no time, it's a quantum phenomenon. That means that's information that's coming in. But the information that's carried on a frequency that your nervous system, once in practice, can begin to transduce that frequency into meaningful information. And the autonomic nervous system in our studies show that it is so outside of normal in terms of energy. I mean, thousands and thousands, I mean, just way outside of normal in terms of the amount of energy in the autonomic nervous system. That autonomic nervous system is getting a very coherent message to all the other systems in the body, and the person gets a biological upgrade in a matter of seconds. Now, we've actually been able to study that process, and it is immediate. And when you see it happening in that immediate, you would consider that a miracle. But the person is transforming in that moment, and they never return back to the same person. That's when energy is really making the biggest difference in matter. And you get a community of people together, and they know how to elevate their emotional state, and they know how to change their physiological state as well. And you don't have to be a Buddhist monk or a yogi to do this. We know that it's a technique like anything else. That if people do this properly, there's more energy that goes to the brain, and there's an ambient field that's created around the body. The body's actually releasing information in the form of frequency. That frequency is energy that's carrying information. And when energy makes it to the heart, this is the place where there's the center of polarity or duality. This is the union of opposites. This is where our wholeness begins. And when we do this properly, if you have that a community of people, like 1,000 people in a room, and they're creating that kind of heart coherence, if they can lay the thought, the intent on that frequency for the greatest good of, say, people in the front of the room wearing a heart rate monitor, it's very surprising to see the majority of those people who are receiving that energy, that their heart goes into coherence at the exact same time, the exact same day, and the exact same meditation. So there's non-local effects that are happening to a person's autonomic nervous system, that they are being entangled or entrained to some frequency. So I thought, well, God, goodness me, if that's the truth, you could do it with a person sitting, within 10 feet of you, or you can do it to someone on the opposite side of the planet, because that is what the quantum field is. There's no separation in the quantum, there's only connection. In fact, it is an invisible field of energy that connects everything and unifies everything materially. And people are fooled by their senses into separation. And so I thought, well, what if we create this kind of fun game where you call up, you send someone a video message, an audio message, a text message, or you call them up on the phone, and you take a moment and you tell them what you love about them. Now that is going to drop the veneer, the facade, this kind of protection that we have. And we saw our community do this with such sincerity. And the moment you start doing that, you can't not feel love because you're expressing it. And it puts the person who's receiving it in an altered state as well. And they're more prone to receive love because they're starting to feel the same energy, the same emotion. So then the person goes into a meditation then, it's called Build Up 20, and then it's a 15-minute meditation on the understanding that they can entrain someone else. And when we love somebody, we want them to feel what we feel. So the way we typically do that is we give. But that's one way, matter to matter. So we're giving them, we're putting them into our heart and seeing, once we do this, what the effects are. And then they take it, and then they turn to someone and they do the same thing. And we've had over 50,000 people now doing this little thing, and it's a way to create a network of love that in fact is a different consciousness than the consciousness of fear, of pain, of suffering, of importance, control. This is, we tend to be more selfless when energy makes it into our heart. Now, that is a new consciousness. Imagine that people were so familiar with the feeling of love, they could regulate to such a degree, and we've seen oxytocin levels in some of our studies go so high off the chart. And oxytocin signals a chemical called nitric oxide, which signals another chemical called endothelial-derived relaxing factor that causes the arteries in your heart and lungs to literally swell. So now, with the same kind of reaction that we have in our sexual organs when we're aroused, that same intensity happens in the heart. Now, when that occurs, there's a reset in a person's baseline for trauma. Their immune system, their thymus is getting a lot of energy, their heart is regulating properly. That's a new consciousness. That's a consciousness that cares for one another, that tells the truth to one another, that supports one another, that informs one another, that heals one another, that shines for others so that they can shine, that considers the others when they make a choice. That is a new consciousness. And imagine that feeling being constant for you instead of fear. Imagine that feeling. And the research on oxytocin says that when you feel just a little bit of love, or you have a little bit of an elevation in oxytocin levels when it's externally administered, that it's impossible to hold a grudge. In other words, this isn't something where you're trying to be spiritually advanced and saying, I forgive you. This is, I feel so good. Listen, I feel so great. Forget about it.